need. I commend this straight into the House.
Alison Toulis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there have been 2 deaths in hotel accommodation in Glasgow Central since the start of lockdown. Adnan Elbi in Macleigh's guest house at the start of May, and Badreddin Abdallah Adam, who was shot dead on Friday after carrying out a shocking knife attack which left 3 asylum seekers, 2 Park Inn hotel staff and police constable David White in hospital. My thoughts are with them and their loved ones, and my thanks go to the emergency services who so bravely and swiftly dealt with a terrifying situation. The Minister came to the House less than 2 weeks ago to hear the concerns raised by my colleague for Glasgow South West. Our concerns persist. At the start of lockdown, the Home Office contractor Mears moved 321 people from initial accommodation in serviced flats across Glasgow into city centre hotels. They did not consult, as they are obliged to do, with Glasgow City Council or anyone else. Contrary to the oral and written evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee by Mears boss John Taylor, this included pregnant women, trafficked women, torture victims, family groups and vulnerable people. Young people included, 2 of whom ended up in hospital on Friday. They were given little notice. According to the Scottish Refugee Council, one family with food in the hob and clothes in the washing machine were given half an hour to gather their belongings. One of my constituents was a friend of Adnan who died in Macleigh's guest house. He has faced extreme trauma because of this, has asked to be moved and is still in that guest house 2 months later. I have some questions for the Minister. Firstly, could he explain which Whitehall source led the BBC to report that 3 people had been found dead, because that was not true and caused a great deal of distress in my constituency. Mears have misled committee members, elected members, and have now admitted that no vulnerability assessments were carried out. When did he find out that Mears had lied to everybody about this, and will he suspend their contract? Will he immediately reinstate the meagre £5.37 a day to allow asylum seekers a small but important degree of dignity? Will he halt any evictions while this outbreak is going on? Will he work with Glasgow City Council, organisations in Glasgow, the Scottish Government and asylum seekers themselves to return them to appropriate accommodation as soon as possible? Will he authorise an independent inquiry into asylum accommodation, because it is very urgently needed? And lastly, will he take responsibility and apologise for a saga which has heaped trauma onto already vulnerable people in Glasgow and across the UK?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for those questions. She started by asking about the move of 321 people in Glasgow from service departments into hotel accommodation, which occurred around about the end of March. That was a separate process to the one I described earlier, involving the extra 4,000 places. Now, the reason that the contractor Mears moved those 321 people from the service departments into hotels was because it was judged that as the coronavirus epidemic took hold, the service departments were not appropriate and not safe. It was done for safety reasons, and that has entirely been borne out by the subsequent statistics. Glasgow accommodates slightly over 5,000 asylum seekers, as the Honourable Lady will know. Many of them, of course, are in her constituency. And during the coronavirus epidemic, over these last 3 months or so, of those over 5,000 service users, only 2 have tested positive for coronavirus. Both, I'm pleased to say, have fully recovered. And amongst those people accommodated in hotels, there has not been a single confirmed case of coronavirus. So the steps being taken to safeguard the public and safeguard the asylum seekers in particular have been successful. Now, she asked about plans for the future, and I can confirm that it is our plan to move people out of those hotels into more regular mainstream accommodation as quickly as possible. That was always the intention. It was only ever a temporary measure. That applies to hotel accommodation, of course, in the rest of the United Kingdom as well as in Scotland. But I would say that these hotels are of good quality. The one involved on Friday was a 3-star Radisson hotel. It was a good hotel with substantial facilities, including ensuite showers for every single room. Now, she asked about evictions, or people being asked to move on, as would ordinarily be the case. That is currently not happening, as she knows, following the announcement on the 27th of March. But in due course, as life returns a little bit more to normal, now that the ban on moving home has ended, we will be returning to normal over time, but it'll be done in a very careful and a very phased way. Nothing will be done in a rush. And I would point out that for those people who have successful asylum grants, they will actually be better off with universal credit when they move on. So it's in their interests as well. Now, there are a number of questions that her and her colleagues from Glasgow asked me in a letter dated a week ago today, 22nd of March. I do now have detailed answers to all of those questions. I will be sending them in writing to her honourable friend in the first instance in the next 24 to 48 hours, and then meeting with all Glasgow MPs who wish to meet to go through those in detail, either later this week or at the latest early next week.